The biggest story in all of sports this morning is happening in New York, but could it have an impact in New Orleans? We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, to all you everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, you can subscribe and follow always for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, so that you never miss the latest episodes. And if you want to keep that conversation going one-on-one with me, take part in our exclusive film studies, Q&As, early access, inside information, and much more, you can become a Locked On Saints insider by simply heading over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSaints and joining a community I would love for you to be a part of. As always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on your favorite social media, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media. You can find me as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network, Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation site covering the New Orleans Saints every Tuesday on the Locked On NFL podcast, and here with you every single Monday through Friday, and then some on Locked On Saints. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most fun way to play daily fantasy sports. All you got to do is pick two or more players, choose whether or not they're going to come in more or less than their projections, and then you can walk away with some big earnings. Visit prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL today or use promo code LockedOnNFL in all lowercase for a first deposit match up to $100. On today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're going to take a look at the New Orleans Saints defense, which dominated against the Tennessee Titans, but still had some close calls. We'll discuss why those happened and revisit an old phrase that I used to use here on the show all the time about how games are decided and why Sunday's game was an exact example of that. We're also going to take a look at the fact that for all of the things that we could see that the New Orleans Saints offense struggled with, protection, offensive line, run game, those things, there were clear and obvious improvements for this offense that should make you very, very excited for when they catch their rhythm. But first, the New Orleans Saints could potentially be receiving a phone call from the New York Jets, depending upon how they're feeling after what is still at this time expected to be, but not yet confirmed as I'm recording this. It might be confirmed by the time that you're watching or listening. Achilles tear for Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers got 4 plays into his New York Jets tenure. You'll remember all of the conversation we had over the offseason about where will he go, where won't he go, what's going to happen, what's not going to happen, the darkness retreat, all of these things that we all followed so very closely. And it all came potentially to a crashing and devastating end just 4 snaps into its realization. Now, I know this is not a New York Jets show, so Ross, why are you talking about Aaron Rodgers here on Locked On Saints? Well, it's happening again. Everybody is starting to pin Jameis Winston as the guy that could be traded from New Orleans. And I'm here to tell you why I don't think that's going to happen. Could the New Orleans Saints potentially receive a phone call from the New York Jets for Jameis Winston? Maybe. Could the New Orleans Saints potentially trade Jameis Winston to the New York Jets so that the Jets have another option at quarterback? Maybe. You know what we never say? We never say never when it comes to the NFL. The New York Jets already have several former New Orleans Saints on their roster, guys like Thomas Morstead, Justin Hardy, so on and so forth. But I just don't see this one happening. And it's not because I think that the New Orleans Saints might not look to trade Jameis Winston. You remember that at the beginning of this offseason, as we were kind of discussing the Jameis Winston trade thing, I didn't see the Saints moving Jameis Winston early on in the season, but as they got closer and closer to the trade deadline and a team needed a quarterback, then maybe they would listen to some phone calls at that point. And I do think that you listen to those phone calls, but right now, I can't see the New Orleans Saints trading away Jameis Winston and sending him to New York. I also can't see New York trading for any quarterback in the NFL. I really don't see them doing it. I think that the New York Jets probably just stick with Zach Wilson, who's had an entire offseason working under Aaron Rodgers. And I know that the Zach Wilson that you saw last night against the Buffalo Bills wasn't the greatest Zach Wilson, but that was also a Zach Wilson with a very limited playbook who was, thrown into a game 4 snaps into the first quarter on an offense that he was not prepared and did not install over the course of the week. So things would look different the next week. I would think that the New York Jets, surely, who have already given up so much draft capital to address the quarterback position, won't be sprinting or running or leaping at the opportunity to trade some more draft capital for their quarterback position. So by that, I think that Jameis Winston stays here in New Orleans, and that the idea of Jameis Winston being traded to the New York Jets is nothing more than, convenient lines being drawn. Look, the Saints and the Jets have an active trade history, right? They've traded 4 quarterbacks before. The New Orleans Saints sent a draft pick over to the New York Jets to get Teddy Bridgewater here. Teddy Bridgewater went 5-0 as their starting quarterback in the stead of Drew Brees, who was dealing with an injury, and then got a whole new opportunity over in Carolina to be the starting quarterback, an opportunity that he earned. Unfortunately, it didn't go well. It didn't work out, but he got that opportunity, and it was one that he absolutely deserved. And so you look at where the Saints are in terms of, their connection with the New York Jets, their, having sent players there, the Saints having former players on that roster, there being former Jets on this New Orleans Saints roster, guys like Nathan Shepard, Demario Davis, of course, most notably one of the best free agent acquisitions to come from, for the New Orleans Saints outside of Drew Brees. They traded with the Jets to get Jonathan Vilma here. There's a long-standing and still active history of those two organizations having a partnership. So that's why I say that the Saints could potentially receive that phone call. And if I'm the Saints, I pick up the phone, I listen, but I'm not really in a hurry to make that move right now. I want you to see Zach Wilson struggle and get really, really desperate for a couple of weeks if Zach Wilson struggles. But if you're the New York Jets, you're going to try to roll with your guy first and foremost and see if you're able to find a way to win with Zach Wilson and that defense, which is absolutely remarkable. And I think the other thing that you learned from watching that Monday Night Football game last night is exactly what we kind of expected. And what Joe Woods told us during his press conference with us earlier last week, that defenses usually look really, really good to begin the year and then to end the year, but eventually the offenses begin to take over. Look at the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills being a team with Josh Allen that usually you're completing, air yard, 20+ air yard passes over and over and over again. They got one of them things yesterday. 2 interceptions down the field, 3 interceptions thrown to the same player and Jordan Whitehead. So what you see is defense outperforming offense early on in the season. It's one of the reasons why I don't think that the offensive struggle for the New Orleans Saints was as much of a surprise as some folks are making it out to be. We kept talking here on this show about growing pains. They're going to have them on the offensive side. It's going to take some time. It's not going to happen right off the bat. And I think that when you watch an offense that is as together as the Buffalo Bills, have very similar struggles against a defense that they have consistently struggled against as well. I should asterisk that, right? The New York Jets have not made it easy on Josh Allen over the course of time, but it does give you sort of a little bit of a glimpse into what it is that we've expected when it comes to defenses versus offenses across the NFL. The reason why I bring that up is because for all of the things that the New Orleans Saints struggled with on offense, run game, pass blocking, run blocking, the offensive line as a whole, those types of things, it's just as evident the things that they did that went well and that helped them and that showed that play calling, offensive creativity, all in a different place. Let's break that down in a much better place. Let's break that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sports betting partner here on the Locked On Podcast Network. If you've never used FanDuel before, now is a great time. You sign up for FanDuel for your first time, you put your first $5 bet down, and you get $200 in bonus bets for you to use on more bets guaranteed. So if you like the New Orleans Saints on the road, Monday Night Football in just a few days, going up against the Carolina Panthers, favored 2.5 on the road. That includes the Panthers getting some points for being at home there. But if you like the Saints to cover that, FanDuel is your place to go. Put $5 down no matter what. You're getting $200 back. And for all customers, if you put $5 down, you're going to get $100 off of NFL Sunday Ticket with YouTube TV or YouTube as well. So this is the best time to head over to FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and take advantage of an offer that you won't want to miss. Just head over to FanDuel.com/LockedOn today. Again, that's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Big thank you, as always, to all you everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day for all the struggles that we watched the New Orleans Saints have in their opening victory against the Tennessee Titans. On the offensive side, there were still improvements as well, and they were clear and evident, as was Rashid Shaheed's touchdown, second touchdown that should have been, but, things that are clear and evident to us aren't always evident to those in stripes, as we have seen over and over again. Look, the New Orleans Saints offense, I've seen a lot of criticism on the play calling. I've seen a lot of criticism for the Saints lacking creativity and being predictable and all these other things. And the predictability one, I think I get. I think I understand. I don't agree, but I think I get why people are saying it. They're saying it because the run game wasn't working. So therefore, the run game was predictable. But I think what we saw a lot is if the New Orleans Saints got one more block, the block that they should have gotten, then all of a sudden these 2-3 yard gains turned into 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe even bigger yard gains as well. So there was good stuff in the run game there in terms of the creativity, the distribution, the run diversity, the point of attack diversity, all the things that you want to see an offense do with their run game. The New Orleans Saints did. And look, they didn't get away from the run game too, which is the thing I maybe commend them on the most. I think they averaged like 2.7 yards per carry, is under 3 yards per carry, but yet they still ran the ball 27 times. And even at the end of the game, it wasn't like running it to get the clock out. Remember, they had to throw, right? They had to throw 40 yards downfield to Rashid Shaheed. They got the big run when they needed it from Jamal Williams, who fumbled, but then was able to quickly recover it, all that. So I think that like the run game and the predictability part of that, I can see where the conversation is coming from. I don't think that it's fully accurate. I don't think that it fully and most successfully summarizes what actually happened for the New Orleans Saints during this game. But I understand the impetus from which it kind of grows. But I think that when you look at the Saints offense, the two things to me, aside from the things that we just mentioned, like the point of attack and the run game and moving it around and different points with it, different approaches, different types of runs, different pulls, things like that, inside, outside zone, we saw a diversity of those things, all that. You just saw the missed blocks and the execution, right? And what did we say the one thing the New Orleans Saints needed to be able to do in this game was execute. And they didn't execute in the run game, therefore the run game didn't happen, but hopefully that gets better next week. But there are two other things that I think that the New Orleans Saints did extremely well, and a couple of things that you want to see some more of. So let's break that down. I'm going to leave the offensive line away from this conversation because not because I'm ignoring it, but because like that's not the focus of this conversation. We know that the offensive line played poorly. We know that the offensive line has to get better going into next week's game. We know that it's not just Trevor Penning, but the interior of the offensive line struggled as well. The Saints gave out 24 pressures in this game, according to Pro Football Focus. We'll dive into some more of those numbers tomorrow, but it wasn't great. It wasn't great when it came to the offensive line, but we know that. So the things that went well for New Orleans come down to this. Creativity requires things like motion before the play action, misdirection, all that. We saw a big time uptick in all three of those categories for the New Orleans Saints offense. We saw the New Orleans Saints when it comes to pocket passers, right? We're not going to include, I'm not including Taysom Hill in this number because when Taysom Hill's on the field, there's almost always pre-snap motion on those QB powers. So I'm not too worried about that. But when it comes to the pocket passers, Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton of last year, and then the numbers around Derek Carr of this first game, the Saints used motion nearly 10% more than they used it, or this year in this one game, than they used it last year. And I know it's just one game, right? So there's going to be ebbs and flows. There's going to be games where they use it more than 10%. There's going to be games where they use it, less than they used it on average last year. But this is an early indicator of what the New Orleans Saints offense wants to be. This is what they want their identity to be, a creative and explosive offense. We saw the Saints with several 20-plus yard plays in the passing game. We didn't see very many explosive run plays, but we saw some that almost got there. But a lot of that misdirection, a lot of the motion before plays, the play action, all those things, like those are things that aided the New Orleans Saints. The over route to Chris Olave that Derek Carr hit on the left sideline got pulled down because the linebackers got preoccupied elsewhere. We saw the Saints be able to kind of shake up a little bit of the Tennessee Titans and their cover 3 defense by forcing the linebackers to spread, opening up the middle of the field and being able to hit Michael Thomas over the middle. The Saints' opening drive was indicative of the identity that I'm sure that they want to have. Michael Thomas, 25 yards down the left sideline, big connection with Rashid Shaheed on the right sideline, going back to Michael Thomas over the middle of the field, finding the soft spot of that zone. If Derek Carr either gets the ball out quicker, or if Michael Thomas reacts to Derek Carr flushing out of the pocket earlier, that misconnection that they had in the back right corner of the end zone is probably a touchdown to open up their opening series as opposed to a field goal. But you can see that on tape, and then you'll see them be able to adjust that moving forward, right? That's them working out of structure, not within structure. So you're having to improv a bit, all of those things. And then the second thing that I thought that the Saints did really well, and this really kind of comes down to Derek Carr and the receivers, but Derek Carr performed very well under pressure and was under pressure quite a bit. 17 dropbacks he was under pressure. That's 44+% that he was under pressure throughout this game. Completed 8 of his 13 passes for over 160 yards during that. No touchdowns, no interceptions either, but posted over a 100 passer rating. So his ability to be able to move within the pocket, I think he had one batted pass that actually raises his completion percentage to just over like 69% or something like that, which was kind of where he finished the entire game as a whole. But just excellent work by this New Orleans Saints group of skill position players and Derek Carr to be able to operate outside of structure. Because remember, that's not just the quarterback. If the quarterback gets flushed right, everybody that's out there has to play flow right too. And these are things that we saw Chris Olave do extremely well his rookie season, Rashid Shaheed do extremely well his rookie season, and then we're seeing them continue that going into their second year. Chris Olave's deployment was all over the place. He took 5 snaps out of the backfield, 3 of which planted, 2 of which while in motion, and they picked up good yardage off of those, yards after catch for Chris Olave. These were the things that we talked about before the season. If you want to see Chris Olave become a better yards after catch receiver, then scheme him into open areas of the field. Remember that conversation? That's exactly what we saw the New Orleans Saints do in this game. That's why he had so many of those catch and run opportunities. He probably had more catch and run opportunities this year than he had, or in that one game, than he had all season last season, because of ball placement, because of scheme, because of the receivers pulling him down, because of Michael Thomas being on the field, all of those things. So if you want to know what the New Orleans Saints want to be on offense, those are the nuggets. They want to be able to operate under pressure. They want to be a calm offense. They want to be able to utilize motion, be creative, and therefore be unpredictable. If they stay healthy, they can do that. If they don't stay healthy, they can't do that. And if they can't win on the offensive line, they ain't going to stay healthy. So that becomes the catalyst for all of it, for sure. And so the things you want to see the New Orleans Saints continue to improve here, that in addition to the things that they're already showing you that they've improved, offensive line play, being able to build your run game, and then just simply also being able to get into the end zone in the red zone. Like, this was a big issue for them last year. So this is where maybe a little bit more Taysom Hill, a little bit more Jimmy Graham in future weeks could potentially make a big difference for this offense, make them a little bit more of a scoring offense as opposed to just we're able to move the ball offense and settle for field goals. Can't have that be the case in every game. Got away with it last week because they were the one team to score a touchdown, but not every opposition and every opposing team that they play are they going to limit to 5 field goals. You're going to have to be ready to score points. You're going to have to be ready to score touchdowns. These pieces, but also, getting their weapons out on the field in the red zone and being able to take advantage of those opportunities, that's going to take them a far, long way this offseason, especially looking at what the rest of this division has looked like over the course of that first week. Coming up next, the New Orleans Saints had some big miscues over on the defensive side that they got away with, but this is the way that the game of football is played. It all comes down to one word: moments. I'll explain what I mean as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and absolute most fun way to play daily fantasy sports. All you have to do is pick 2 or more players, choose whether or not they're going to come in at more or less than their Prize Picks projections, and then you're good. You're set to turn $10 into $250, 25 times your earnings. Look, we can do one right now. Chris Olave, you think he's going to come in at more or less than 62.5 receiving yards? I'll take the more on that. I'll take the more on Derek Carr at 235.5 passing yards. I'll take the less when it comes to Jamal Williams, 55.5 rushing yards. And I'll take the less when it comes to Michael Thomas, 52.5 receiving yards. Maybe I might take the more on that one, actually. I'm not sure. But there you go. 4 of them in there. Those are your entries. You see how fast we did that? That's how quickly you could be turning $10 into like $250. You want to learn more about Prize Picks? Head over to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL today and use the promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, for that first deposit match up to $100 at Prize Picks today. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a quick look at the notes that I took away from our film study, which I'll have film study videos dropping throughout the day today over on Subtext. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSaints if you want to get into any of that in terms of me drawing on the video and it telestrating, if you will, all that other stuff. But one of the things that I took away from the New Orleans Saints defense, two things that I took away from the New Orleans Saints defense. But the big thing that I wanted to focus on was close calls, right? The Saints had a couple of close calls in this one. Tajay Spears' wheel route down the left sideline. They had another wheel route for a tight end that ran wide open. Actually, on Paulson Adebo's interception, it looked like a route at the very top of the screen was uncovering and was going to be wide open down the field. So there were a couple of these little coverage miscues that the Saints had. The big catch and run by Derrick Henry on the screen. Those plays could have been big moments that Tennessee couldn't capitalize on. And I like the way that Dennis Allen kind of broke this down on Monday's presser when he talked about, this is the way that the game of football is played. There are moments that defenses give up that offenses take advantage of. There are moments that defenses give up that offenses don't take advantage of. And there are moments that offenses give up that defenses do or don't take advantage of. And I think that's the separator for how this game went. Even though it might have happened simultaneously, that the New Orleans Saints defense gave up something and the Tennessee Titans gave up. Or let's say this differently, actually. Even though it happened on the same play sometimes, that the New Orleans Saints defense offered something to the offense, right? And then the Tennessee Titans offense offered something to the Saints defense. The majority of the time, the Saints defense was the one to take advantage of that offering. The interception that Paulson Adebo got might be one of the easiest interceptions you'll see the New Orleans Saints get all year. That's not to diminish at all that Paulson Adebo got that interception, because you still have to make the play. There was a break on a play that Marshon Lattimore saw in a stacked release that he watched. He kind of folded back and then ended up making a break on the ball that he wasn't able to come up with. That could have been a second interception for him. Not every player makes the play, right? And that's okay. But for Paulson Adebo, that interception was one where, because of how well he was placed in his coverage, it just doesn't get any easier than that. The Treylon Burks didn't even really try to contest and knock the ball away or anything like that. So I think that when you look at where the Saints won this game, if you take 10 best plays of this entire game, probably 2 of them are Tennessee Titans plays, right? The screen to Derrick Henry. Oh, 3 of them. 3 of them are Tennessee Titans plays. The screen to Derrick Henry, the interception on Derek Carr in the 2-minute drive, and then the opening kickoff, fumble, and recovery. The rest of them are, Marshon Lattimore's interception, Paulson Adebo's interception, Marcus May's interception, Isaac Adams' breakup, Rashid Shaheed's touchdown, Rashid Shaheed's deep shot, Michael Thomas's opening catch down the left sideline, and then maybe you can throw in a Tennessee Titans sack in there. I might throw in a New Orleans Saints sack in there. But you get the idea. At most, 40% of the biggest moments of this game were the Tennessee Titans. 60% of them were the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints won the game. Oh, and then the punt block, actually, ahead of any of the sacks, the punt block that Zach Bond had. So 30% to 70%, it's about moments. And we've talked about this on the show before, right? If you're an everyday, you've probably heard this before. The game of football is decided by moments. It's not 60 minutes of football. It's a cumulative, maybe 30 seconds of moments that decide a football game. It's the 3 interceptions, the block punt, the touchdown. Those are the things that end up setting you up to win a football game. And so you have to stack those moments. So close calls can be close calls all they want to be. If they're not moments, they don't make a difference. Now, the New Orleans Saints will have some things that they're going to want to clean up over on the defensive side. They want to get better. They don't want to relinquish those potential moments to opposing offenses. Completely makes sense. Completely understandable. And with a Bryce Young over on the other side who has a big play ability on Monday, with a Jordan Love who showed you his big play ability operating against a pretty porous but still solid Chicago Bears defense. Again, early in the season where defenses should be, the reigning champions of all games. They're not going to be able to rely on Ryan Tannehill level mistakes all game. But when they get those mistakes, when an offense offers those mistakes, they have to be able to have that moment. They have to be able to get that interception. You have to be able to have that ball tipped. You have to have that tip fall into the hands of Marcus May and catch it. You have to seal those moments. Those are the moments that win games. And if you have a lot of those moments over on the defensive side, you're probably going to win the game. And that's what we saw this past week. The other thing that I'll mention that I really enjoyed watching from my film study for the New Orleans Saints is the defensive line. Whether it was in the run game or the pass rush game, the New Orleans Saints defensive line played very well and played a lot better than they played last year. They did not get moved off the line of scrimmage as much. They got, look, there were a couple of big run plays, the stiff arm by Derrick Henry. There was the screen pass, if you consider the short passing game as an extension of the run game. There were some of those moments that got away from them for sure, 100%. But a lot of times, I would say 2 or 3 of those were run plays. You'll notice that those 2 or 3 run plays, though, were not moments, right? This is why I said getting better in the run game is about getting to middle of the pack with the run game. The biggest thing you have to do is stop the pass, and that's what the New Orleans Saints did against the Tennessee Titans. That's one of the reasons why they won the game. But I was very pleased with the play of the defense. I shouldn't say I was pleased. Who am I? I did enjoy very much the play of the defensive line, especially with all the turnover that they had. Brian Brzee getting in there for a half sack, getting several hits on the quarterback. Carl Granderson just ate all game, a sack and a half, 4 hits on the quarterback, 5 pressures as well. Huge game for him. 5 pressures from Cam Jordan, who also had a half sack. I mean, this New Orleans Saints defense did what it wants to do, which is live in the backfield. And that's exactly what you want to see from him. And the linebackers didn't make it any easier for Ryan Tannehill to have, escape patterns up the middle and things like that. That was one of the things that I'm really excited to see for next week, that the defensive line did so well, is that Ryan Tannehill, aside from 1 or 2 plays, did not have an escape lane from the pocket. He did not have a place to run. There was no open gap because the Saints over pursued. Like, the discipline was so stout on that pass rush that it did not give Ryan Tannehill an escape route at all. Can they do that against Bryce Young, who will be a lot more dangerous if he finds that escape route? That's going to be a big test for the New Orleans Saints coming up next week. All right, y'all, as we get into Wednesday, we're going to dive into a little bit more of the analytics, the numbers, things like that. We'll have more of that for you in terms of coverage. Marshon Lattimore was absolutely locked down. Carl Granderson was insane, as was the rest of the defensive line in terms of getting pressure. Just how much did they bug Ryan Tannehill? We're going to break it all down in the numbers in tomorrow's episode. I appreciate you, as always, y'all, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, for those film studies, join subtext.com/Locked On Saints. Join that today so I can get them over to you later on in the afternoon. Thank you so much for making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. It's just Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.